The idea of the US pulling back from NATO isn't just speculation anymore. It's a real and growing threat. If Washington steps away, can Europe defend itself? The answer might be more alarming than you think. With rising threats from Russia and China and a shifting US foreign policy, the nuclear gap is becoming more dangerous than ever. Stick around, because the future of European security might be far more uncertain than anyone is willing to admit. Since World War II, the US has been the backbone of European security, providing conventional military support and nuclear deterrence. This arrangement stems from the Cold War, when the US established NATO and deployed nuclear weapons across Europe to counter the Soviet threat. This leads to nuclear dependence, which is when one country relies on another for its nuclear defense capabilities. This dependence exists because most European nations do not have their nuclear weapons and instead participate in NATO's nuclear sharing program. When the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons (NPT) was negotiated in the 1960s, the US and the Soviet Union deliberately structured the treaty to allow NATO's nuclear sharing to continue. European nations might pursue their nuclear programs, increasing the risk of global proliferation. As a result, NATO's European members were locked into a system where they depended on Washington's extended deterrence. Under this arrangement, the US stationed an estimated 100 tactical B-61 nuclear bombs across 5 European countries: Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Turkey. These payloads are intended for use by NATO's dual-capable aircraft fighter jets. In Germany, the Buchel Air Base is home to 20 B-61 bombs guarded by US personnel but intended for delivery by German Tornado jets. Belgium's Kleine Brogel Air Base also hosts 20 B-61 bombs, with Belgian F-16s tasked as the delivery system. Similarly, the Netherlands stores 20 bombs at Volkel Air Base, where Dutch F-16s are on standby. Italy's situation is even more contentious. With B-61 bombs stored at both Aviano and Gedi air bases, Italy plays a key role in NATO's nuclear planning. The weapons remain under US control in peacetime, with permissive action link codes ensuring no unauthorized use. In wartime, however, the payloads would be mounted on European fighter jets, like Germany's Tornadoes or the Netherlands' F-16s for nuclear delivery. If NATO were to conduct a nuclear strike, the mission would require political approval from NATO's Nuclear Planning Group, as well as final authorization from the US President and UK Prime Minister. This chain of command shows the fact that Europe does not truly own the nuclear weapons stationed on its soil. They are technically capable of delivering nuclear weapons, but are trapped in permanent dependence on the US. Decades of avoiding independent nuclear development left the continent vulnerable. We can all see what happened to Ukraine when the country agreed with the US, UK, and Russia at the Budapest Memorandum, where Ukraine handed over its nuclear arsenal to Russia in exchange for security guarantees. Russia broke this memorandum in 2014 when it annexed Crimea. Without US nuclear protection, Europe is fragmented and unprepared to counter threats from adversaries like Russia. The continent's nuclear security depends entirely on American commitment, an increasingly uncertain factor as US priorities shift. Washington is now focused on the Indo-Pacific and domestic challenges, raising doubts about its long-term defense of Europe. President Donald Trump's America First approach might dismiss the NATO commitments, and his recent statements suggesting he would encourage Russia to attack non-compliant NATO members have sent shockwaves across Europe. European leaders now fear that Trump's presidency back in 2025 would further weaken NATO and leave Europe vulnerable. Former President Joe Biden's focus on Asia strategy has further deprioritized European security. The US withdrawal from Afghanistan and its increasing involvement in Pacific partnerships highlight a broader trend of shifting priorities. It is now evident that China, not Europe, is the primary focus of US foreign policy. US public opinion is also shifting, with more Americans against defending Europe. Economic concerns are causing the nation to prioritize domestic issues over international security, leaving Europe in a critical dilemma. Another factor is Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, which reshaped global security concerns, particularly due to Vladimir Putin's nuclear threats. His rhetoric escalated as he threatened Western nations against interfering. To prove these threats, Russia moved tactical nuclear weapons to Belarus, a clear demonstration of its strategic posture. Analysts suggest that Putin's nuclear posturing was intended to deter NATO intervention while pressuring Ukraine into submission. Lastly, the Middle East further complicates the equation. Instability in the region, including conflicts involving Iran or terrorist threats, could divert US attention and resources, limiting its capacity to respond to threats in Europe. Plus, now that China is the primary geopolitical threat, if the US is drawn into a Taiwan crisis, its ability to defend Europe could be severely compromised, a position where it must prioritize one region over the other. This could leave Europe vulnerable, forcing NATO allies to take greater responsibility for their security. European nations must accept that their long-standing military dependence on the US is becoming increasingly uncertain. NATO's Article 5, which states that an attack on one member is an attack on all, was invoked for the first time after 9/11, with European nations standing by the US in Afghanistan. However, whether the US would return the favor if Europe faced a significant security crisis remains unknown. The question of whether Europe can defend itself without the United States has become increasingly urgent. In this context, two European nuclear powers, France and the UK, are often seen as potential pillars of European defense. But can they protect Europe? The answer is far from straightforward. The United Kingdom, one of NATO's 3 nuclear powers, has 225 strategic nuclear warheads. Its arsenal consists of Trident II D5 missiles, carried by Vanguard-class submarines, with one submarine always on patrol to ensure a continuous at-sea deterrent. This policy ensures that even if the UK were hit by a nuclear attack, it could retaliate. However, the UK's nuclear strategy highly depends on the United States. The Trident missiles are leased from the US, and the warheads are reportedly based on American designs. Moreover, the UK's nuclear arsenal is relatively small compared to those of the US or Russia. It is not designed for tactical use, but for preventing catastrophic attacks. This limits its utility in addressing regional threats. Even though the UK's focus is on transatlantic ties at the same time, it has been steadily increasing its presence in Europe since 2022, signaling a strategic pivot toward the continent. France, on the other hand, is Europe's most independent nuclear power, with approximately 290 warheads as of 2023. France's nuclear triad includes submarine-launched ballistic missiles, air-launched cruise missiles, and short-range air-to-surface missiles. French President Emmanuel Macron has even suggested extending France's nuclear umbrella to other European nations. However, this proposal came with a red flag. France would keep sole control over its nuclear weapons, leaving other nations dependent on Paris's decisions in a crisis. Another issue is capability. While 290 warheads sound impressive, Russia has over 4,000. Even with advanced submarines and air-launched nukes, France's arsenal is no match for Moscow's. Expanding the French deterrent to cover Europe would require more missiles, more infrastructure, and more money, none of which is currently planned. Then there's the question of control. France insists only the French president can authorize nuclear strikes. Would the UK, Germany, or Poland accept a security guarantee they have no say in? The situation is further complicated by the aging infrastructure and political uncertainties surrounding NATO's nuclear sharing. Germany, for instance, is phasing out its Tornado jets, which are certified to deliver B-61 bombs, and replacing them with F-35s. Similarly, Turkey's Incirlik Air Base, which houses an estimated 20 US nuclear weapons, but with a strained US-Turkey relationship, has led to calls for removing these weapons, destabilizing the region. With the Ukraine war and nuclear confrontation, Eastern European nations like Poland expressed interest in joining the nuclear sharing agreement. Poland's president, Andrzej Duda, has openly called for US nuclear weapons to be stationed on Polish soil, citing the need to counter Russian aggression. However, such moves are fraught with political and logistical challenges, not to mention the potential for escalating tensions with Moscow. The uncomfortable truth is that Europe has never built a unified nuclear force, and the reasons for this are as much political as they are practical. The cost of developing and maintaining a nuclear arsenal is astronomical, and the political will to do so has always been lacking. The reality is that neither France nor the UK is currently equipped to replace the US. France's arsenal is too nationally focused to provide for the entire continent. The UK, on the other hand, lacks the independence needed to address Europe's security challenges. So, what's the solution now? The answer lies in two controversial possibilities. but each option comes with its own set of risks and challenges. Firstly, a joint EU-led nuclear deterrent. This would involve a trilateral British-French-German nuclear umbrella operating under NATO's Supreme Allied Commander Europe, SACEUR. Such a framework would allow European states to share nuclear responsibilities while maintaining alignment with NATO's broader goals. This would ensure that the continent's security isn't held hostage by US election cycles. Additionally, a unified nuclear deterrent could strengthen Europe's position against Russia and other rising powers. It will provide a credible counterbalance to Moscow's aggressive posturing and nuclear threats. However, the idea of a European nuclear force faces significant hurdles. One major hurdle is political resistance within the EU. Countries like Germany, Italy, and Spain have historically been reluctant to host nuclear weapons, and their populations are deeply divided on the issue. The 1968 Non-Proliferation Treaty further complicates matters. While France opposes the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, countries like Austria, Ireland, and Malta support it. Cost is another critical factor. Developing and maintaining a nuclear arsenal is astronomically expensive. Moreover, proposals like the Future Combat Air System, a joint French-German project, won't be operational until 2040, leaving a significant gap in the short term. France spends billions annually on its nuclear program. Expanding this to a multinational European force would require significant financial commitments, diverting resources from other pressing priorities like climate change, healthcare, and conventional defense. The risks are massive. So in this case, the second best possible solution for Europe is to strengthen its conventional deterrence. Since 2022, European nations have significantly increased defense spending, but the region still lags behind the US. NATO's 2023 report shows that European members, excluding the US, spent around $380 billion on defense, while the US alone spent $860 billion. To counterbalance Russia's estimated 1,912 tactical nuclear weapons, Europe would need to deploy advanced missile defense systems, including THAAD, Patriot, SAMP-T, and Aegis Ashore units. A fully operational European missile shield would cost over $100 billion and require years of development. With no immediate nuclear alternative, Europe's best option is to modernize its conventional forces, establish stronger missile defense networks, and prepare for a future without US nuclear support. Now comes the big question. Can Europe truly defend itself without the US? The answer is now more complex than a simple yes or no. Due to Russia's current weakened state, militarily and economically, if the country goes to war, Europe would likely hold its ground and crush the threat today with its conventional forces. However, the situation could shift dramatically in the coming years. Russia is already producing significant amounts of military equipment because of its Ukraine war. Even if the peace agreement happens, within 2 years, Russia could once again pose a regional security threat, and within 5 years, it might be capable of a large-scale war. Therefore, maintaining a strong deterrence 5 years from now will require major investments in conventional forces and the development of a robust nuclear umbrella. The key challenge is that developing new advanced military systems takes 5 to 10 years. Meanwhile, Europe's defense industry is fully booked, with some nations even looking to source equipment from South Korea and Australia. But Europe's got an advantage here. It has overwhelming air superiority, which remains formidable even without US support. A crucial aspect of this defense strategy is air defense systems capable of countering missile and robotic threats. So, while Europe is in a strong position today, sustained investment and strategic planning are necessary to ensure long-term security. The time for tough decisions is now. What do you think? Is Europe ready to stand on its own, or is a nuclear crisis inevitable? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into global security. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video.